What do you do when you're always on edge? Let's explore this on today's Ask a Shrink. So this heightened state of anxiety is called hyperarousal. Now this specifically ties into a cluster of symptoms associated with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Even though there may not be any actual threat going on for you now as an adult, the feelings are in there from your childhood or some type of event that you went through earlier. Now this is also very similar to hypervigilance. These may blend a little bit, so I'll lump them in together in this video. It's always being aware of potential threats around you. So basically, if you're always on guard, you're anticipating something, you're waiting, you're always kind of looking around, what's going to happen next? There's perhaps always some degree of anxiety going on here. You're in this mode so much you may not even know you're in this mode. You don't know what it's like perhaps to be relaxed because from early childhood you always had to be on. So with PTSD, this can tie into a variety of symptoms, the origination of this. But today for the video, I'm going to zoom in more so on childhood trauma, specifically if you're a victim of emotional incest. Being a victim of emotional incest means you were emotionally smothered by a parent or parents, so you had to be on sort of the servant, the emotional slave of the parent. Well, if you're in this role as a child, because you're suppressing yourself so much to be on, you're walking on eggshells, then you are indeed always on. You're in performance mode. You have to be ready. Depending on the level of what a child has to go throughout their childhood, then they may indeed perhaps carry a diagnosis of PTSD. Or with something ongoing like this, CPTSD. And it's complex because it's not just one event or two events, it's ongoing throughout all your childhood. A child raised like this may feel very angry and distrustful of the world because they had to be distrustful at home with their own parents. There wasn't room for them emotionally. And also, of course, they're going to be pissed off at this when they get older. Hopefully they'll be in touch with being angry about this because they were taken advantage of. So why wouldn't you be angry about this? Of course there's anger there, and we want to be in touch with that anger as well. So this can lead to problems with concentration, problems with sleeping, destructive behavior on some level. You're acting out the childhood trauma. And always in a startled, alert awareness. You get startled like that. People may say to you, just calm down, what's wrong with you? Well, they don't know it's because you were emotionally abused as a child, and the walking on eggshells for years at a time has now created this. If you're still not clear if you're dealing with this, it could also be that you're on vacation, you're going somewhere for some R&R, and you just can't relax. Oh my gosh, I'm in the middle of a deserted beach, I'm here for 2 weeks. I'm still looking over my shoulder at everything. So just notice that, don't judge yourself for it, just ask, what's this about? Why am I always so hyper-aroused? Why am I always so hyper-vigilant? Going to sleep, it may take a while to turn everything off, and you may struggle with that because everything had to be on the whole day. That ties into your childhood training. In a way, this is about control. When you think about going to sleep, it's sort of trusting that you're just going to drift off into what? Into being unconscious? You can't control things if you're unconscious. You have to trust that after 6, 7, 8 hours, you're just going to wake up. So we see that even in the sleeping patterns, we can see somebody wanting to control everything, and they'll feel out of control by going to sleep. In addition, of course, to what I mentioned about just being able to relax oneself to be able to drift off. Also at night or also during the day, your brain could just be spinning and spinning and spinning, a lot of ruminating, obsessively thinking about what you need to do to prepare, going over things a bunch of times in your mind. That's hyperarousal. That's related to emotional trauma from your childhood, in this case being a victim of emotional incest. It could happen as well from one incident. Let's say somebody at age 15 witnesses a terrorist attack, or they're in some horrible car accident where they almost lost their life. That's one incident that happened. Whereas with a child who's emotionally smothered, it's year after year after year, but both examples can bring up similar symptoms. In a way, it's like saying what came first, the chicken or the egg, in regard to the hypervigilance. The hypervigilance could be a result of the hyperarousal. So you're hyperaroused due to the childhood trauma, and then because of the arousal always being on, now you're hypervigilant. So the hypervigilance could be a result of that anxiety. But like I said earlier, this all kind of blends, so don't worry about this part too much. It's just being aware of your bodily reactions, the somatic reactions, as well as how you feel. And of course, what you're cognitively doing is your mind racing, running, always anticipating problems. So we want to combine all these things to get an overall picture of how the trauma is impacting you now as an adult. So it's interesting how our brain works, right? How it's wired. It's designed to keep you safe. The fight or flight response, right? We need to have that to survive, especially back in the day when mankind was battling animals to actually just survive. If they didn't, they'd be eaten up. So this is in our DNA big time going way back. So it's about being aware of dangers. And once our brain is wired with that, even though there may not be any dangers at the current time, let's say you're sitting at home on a Saturday night all relaxed, getting ready to nestle up and read a book or watch television or something, and all of a sudden you have a panic attack. Well, that's because as you settle down a bit, the feelings that have been pushed down perhaps for years now have a safer place to come up and pop up at you because they haven't been fully dealt with, right? So now as you relax, sometimes this is what happens. It allows the opening for the deeper feelings to come up, which may indeed cause a panic attack. So again, this is just a sign. Just be aware. It's your unconscious tapping you on the back saying, I think you need to deal with this. Maybe it's time to have some therapy and talk about your childhood. The more you shine a spotlight on it and deal with it, the chances are that the symptoms are going to just diminish on their own over time because you're dealing with the root problem. The adrenaline and the cortisol become stronger when we're in this heightened state. And there again, it ties into the wiring of our brain, our conditioning. So think about a lot of adrenaline rushing through you. You're very on. How are you going to be able to relax? So number one, be aware of if this is your reality. Catch yourself always being on like this. If loved ones or good friends have said to you, you know, you need to just chill a little bit, just take it easy. Rather than perhaps getting defensive about that, just ask yourself, what might they be saying that's actually accurate? They would notice. Coming from a loved one, they would have your best interest in mind. They're giving you a clue. So take that clue seriously and ask yourself if that is indeed true. If you're honest with yourself, you may say, yeah, I'm always on. This is when you can begin some self-care, some self-love, and looking inward and saying, I don't want to live this way the rest of my life. I want to be able to truly relax from time to time. And lastly, I'll just say another symptom of all this, so there could be many more, but one thing to be aware of if you find you're hypersexual, maybe you're a sex addict. Being hypersexual can be a symptom of PTSD or CPTSD, which in this case, in this video, I'm tying it into being a victim of emotional incest. Emotional incest is the robbing a child of their own identity to be there as a mirror, as what's called a little mini husband or mini wife to their parent. This does not involve sex of any type. This is the emotional taking over of a child. Hopefully this shines a little bit of a spotlight for those of you out there who are always on edge, walking on eggshells, to realize there's nothing really wrong with you per se. You're just having these symptoms as a result of dealing with childhood trauma because of the way you were raised by your parents. So please leave me some comments below. I'd love to hear any more thoughts you may have about this topic. Are you hypervigilant in your life? Please subscribe to my mental health YouTube channel if you like these kind of videos. And until next week, this is Brad Shore signing off from Ask a Shrink.